Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast. Welcome into all of our live viewers. And we are going to now be diving into the Cowboys' blowout loss to the New Orleans Saints, a result that not many people were anticipating, myself included. Now, as we got closer to the game, I did end up leaning with the Saints plus 6.5, but to see it occur in blowout fashion in the way that it did was massively surprising to me. This is a Cowboys team, especially on the offensive side of the ball, that was elite when playing at home last year. And the offense was pretty lackluster, and the defense was a bit of an abomination, where the Saints, and we're going to be diving more specifically into the Saints in the next segment here, so I do want to save some of it there. But New Orleans has been putting on a bit of an offensive showcase these first couple games. Now, that being said, they also played the Panthers in that mix, and we just talked about the Panthers a couple segments ago. That's its own sort of category that I don't know how much you can put into stock into games against the Panthers, but 40 plus points per game in each of the last two, and they come into Dallas where it's a very talented defense in my opinion, even without the likes of Deron Bland, who's currently still dealing with an injury, and just blew the doors off of them. And it was probably a bad sign for the Cowboys, considering the fact that the Saints had effortlessly drove down the field in 4 minutes to score on their opening drive, faced one third down, didn't even face another third down until they had 21 points on the board, where they were able to hit Rashid Shaheed over the top for a long touchdown, and then the Alvin Kamara screen that also went 50 or so yards to score there. So this was a very, very underwhelming performance from Dallas's defense. Mike Zimmer is somebody that I think, even despite the fact that he's been out of football the past couple years, knows what he's doing, but Clint Kubiak just dialing up what was sort of a masterclass for this Saints offense to take it to Dallas. And, on the Cowboys side of this all, like we mentioned, defense was pretty atrocious for them for a lot of the game. And then offensively, I think it's more of a personnel issue than a coaching thing. Obviously, Mike McCarthy is somewhat to blame in all of this, and he is going to receive criticism, as he should, but I'm also not really surprised whatsoever by the lack of explosion on this Cowboys offense, where sure, they were able to stick it to the Browns in week 1, but I thought that was far more about the Browns being a little bit of a mess. I know they just won yesterday against Jacksonville, but Jacksonville is also one of these, really concerning teams up to this point, and the Cowboys just unable to really find any form of success on the ground. Now, part of that is partially due to the fact that they were trailing in the majority of this game, so they needed to sort of air it out a little bit more to try and fight their way back into this, but it's something that I'm still concerned with. Obviously, I've been talking about it for a couple months now. I don't really like the running back room that they have between Rico Dowell and Ezekiel Elliott. I think that their offensive line is one of the worst in the league, which is very un-Cowboys-like. And it's interesting. And Dak Prescott, I thought that ultimately he was pretty poor. He wasn't terrible. The couple interceptions that he had were really bad, but again, to some degree, this game was over before it even really started, with the Saints scoring touchdowns on each of their first 4 drives. So I'd be more concerned about the defense than I am coming out of the offense with this game. But, that being said, it does become a little bit interesting, and I feel like I'm sensing a little bit of a pattern here, and the financial repercussions don't even come in for Dallas in regards to that Dak Prescott contract for, another season or so. And that's the same with the Trevor Lawrence deal, the Tua Tagovailoa deal, the a Jared Goff deal. None of these seem to be aging all that great. Now, we're just 2 weeks into the season. It's probably something that we'll do a deeper dive into, in the coming weeks if this trend continues. But you talk about a Cowboys team that was willing to let so many pieces walk in free agency. We're talking about the offensive line here. We're talking about Tyron Smith in that left tackle spot, Tyler Biotish at center. Both of them leave. A handful of key defensive players walk as well. Tony Pollard walks, and instead the Cowboys didn't bring all that many players in. Eric Kendricks was a solid addition for them, was their leading tackler in this game versus New Orleans. And linebacker was definitely a position of need as well. But let's also be realistic here. It's not like Eric Kendricks was some sort of a splash signing. We're talking about a player that has been dealing with some injuries in the past couple years. He's past his 30s now at this point. So I don't know if again, as much as Eric Kendricks is an upgrade over what they have had in recent years, still not saying a ton, and I still don't think that it's something that's really, moving the needle for me. Kendricks was able to play in every game last year, it appears at least. So, there's that going for them. But it seemed like the Cowboys were already sort of preparing, knowing that they were going to have to pay CD and Dak, and eventually they're going to have to pay Micah Parsons. And as a result, they just sort of let all of these key pieces for them end up walking in free agency. And I have been on the record that I am usually pro paying the quarterback, because ultimately if you don't have a sufficient backup plan, your hands are sort of tied anyways, and having a good roster and some good individual players only gets you so far. But I am curious, what percentage of this past offseason and the Dak Prescott negotiation, or more so what their free agency plan was, how tied in that was with the idea that they knew they were about to shell out some big time contracts. And Dak, I'm going to give him maybe slightly more of a pass than I should based off of this performance against the Saints. I also think that Saints have a pretty solid defense as well. So, again, I'm giving a little bit of the benefit to the doubt there, but this is sort of the reality when you talk about dishing out $60 million to a quarterback that I do believe that Dak is a top 10 quarterback in the NFL, but I wouldn't call him elite. I don't think that many people would call him elite. And is he going to be good enough to sort of overcome the other flaws in the roster that were caused based off of the fact that the Cowboys had to pay him so much? And this game in particular would hint that the answer is no there. But that being said, you can't overreact too much. We're still in week 2 here, and the Cowboys did look very good, especially offensively, against what is a good Browns defense. I think that the Browns have their own sort of issues going on in the offensive side of the ball, especially with both of their starting tackles missing the first couple games that Dallas was absolutely able to take advantage of. Micah Parsons was absolutely wreaking havoc in that game. But again, when you just talk about sort of, are you a quarterback that can overcome sort of the obstacles of not having quite as much talent around you once you get paid? Dak Prescott still has to answer that question a little bit. And that's not something that we're immediately going to get the answer to. He also still does have CeeDee Lamb, one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. Jake Ferguson did miss this game for whatever that's worth as well, but their offense feels to me pretty one-dimensional, and I don't know if there is anything that's sort of coming up the ranks for them to be able to take that next step forward. Now, I think the big thing, again, for the Cowboys is more so on that defensive side of the ball. If they are going to win games this year, they can't let that happen. Because the Cowboys, I just don't believe, are built to win shootouts like that on a regular basis. You take away CeeDee Lamb, if opposing teams, sort of bracket them off and send these double teams, where else is Dak really going to go with the ball? Now, Brandon Cooks, I believe it was the wide receiver that scored the touchdown for them in week 1. Like I mentioned, Jake Ferguson did miss this game. A fine tight end there as well. But you're just looking overall at an offense that I don't think is cut out to win games where each team is putting up 30 or so points. You need to be able to shut down the opposing teams, and that very clearly did not happen in this game. Now, again, New Orleans seems like it is a bit of a blossoming offense there under new offensive coordinator Clint Kubiak. So that's also sort of the direction I want to go here as well, is talking about, are the Saints actually building something here? Is this a team that NFL fans need to start taking seriously as playoff threats? We are going to be diving into that conversation, but before we do so, we are going to take a quick break. Do not go anywhere, and we will be right back.